Imagine waiting 9 years, 9 entire years, for the perfect moment to get revenge on someone who humiliated you. Picture this. It's your sister's wedding day. Hundreds of guests are arriving. Thousands of dollars have been spent, and she's about to discover that her hair is falling out in chunks because of something you put in her shampoo. The same thing she did to you on prom night, nearly a decade ago. The wedding gets cancelled. The bride refuses to be seen. But the party? The party goes on, and everyone's laughing about the most calculated act of sibling revenge in history. If you've ever dreamed of getting the perfect revenge on someone who wronged you, hit that subscribe button right now. Smash the like button if you're ready for a story about patience, planning, and poetic justice served ice cold. This tale of long-term revenge will leave you questioning whether you've ever been truly committed to getting even. Trust me, you've never heard anything quite like this. Let me take you back to where this all began. A small town where everyone knows everyone, and childhood grudges can simmer for decades like a slow-cooking stew of resentment. I lived in this tight-knit community years ago, the kind of place where your neighbours aren't just people who happen to live nearby. They're extended family. Kids run freely between houses. Parents share parenting duties without a second thought, and everyone's business becomes everyone's business, for better or worse. My neighbours were the perfect embodiment of this small-town charm. A solid, middle-class family with 2 kids, a boy and a girl, with the girl being about 2 years younger than her brother. On the surface, they seemed like typical siblings. You know the type. They'd play together, fight together, and generally drive their parents to the edge of sanity with their constant energy. But there was something special about these kids. They had elevated sibling rivalry to an art form through their elaborate practical jokes. We're not talking about simple pranks like short-sheeting beds or plastic wrap on the toilet seat. These two were tactical masterminds, constantly engaged in an escalating war of wits that would make military strategists proud. The son, let's call him Jake, became particularly close to my family. He was one of those entrepreneurial kids who understood the value of hard work from an early age. He'd knock on our door, asking if we needed our lawn mowed, our car washed, or any odd jobs done around the house. Not because his parents forced him to, but because he genuinely wanted to earn his own spending money. There's something admirable about a kid who's willing to sweat for what he wants. Over the years, I developed a real fondness for Jake. He wasn't just a neighbour kid doing chores. He became almost like a younger brother to me. We'd chat while he worked, talking about everything from sports to school to his dreams for the future. His father and I bonded over our shared appreciation for Jake's work ethic, and the 3 of us formed an unlikely friendship that bridged the generational gap. The sister, let's call her Emma, was equally impressive, but in completely different ways. Where Jake was methodical and hard-working, Emma was creative and spontaneous. She had this mischievous spark in her eyes that suggested she was always plotting something 3 steps ahead of everyone else. As the younger sibling, she'd learned to be clever and resourceful in her ongoing war with her big brother. For years, their pranks were harmless and hilarious. Jake would put salt in Emma's orange juice. Emma would short-sheet his bed. Jake would hide her favourite book. Emma would rearrange all his video games. It was like watching a masterclass in creative sibling warfare, and honestly, it was entertaining as hell to witness from the sidelines. But as they entered high school, something shifted. The stakes got higher, the pranks got more elaborate, and the potential for real consequences began to emerge. What had once been innocent fun started to carry the weight of actual malice. Emma, now a confident high school sophomore, seemed to decide that simple embarrassment wasn't enough anymore. Her pranks began to target things that actually mattered to Jake. His reputation, his relationships, his important moments. It was as if she'd crossed some invisible line from playful teasing into psychological warfare. Jake, now a senior, was dealing with all the pressures that come with being 17 and trying to figure out your future. College applications, part-time jobs, maintaining grades, and navigating the complex social dynamics of high school. It's a lot for any teenager to handle. The last thing he needed was to worry about what creative torture his little sister might inflict next. Then came prom night. For most teenagers, prom represents something profound. It's not just a dance, it's a rite of passage, a culmination of years of high school experience, and for many kids, it's the first time they get to feel truly adult and sophisticated. Jake had been planning for this night for months. He'd saved money from his odd jobs to rent the perfect tuxedo, he'd asked out a girl he'd been crushing on for years, and he'd coordinated with friends to make it a night they'd remember forever. The morning of prom, Jake went through his usual routine: shower, shampoo, the normal preparation ritual that millions of teenagers follow when getting ready for important events. Except Emma had turned his shampoo into a weapon of mass hair destruction. She'd somehow gotten her hands on hair removal cream, the industrial strength stuff designed to strip hair from legs and underarms, and had carefully mixed it into Jake's shampoo bottle. Not just a little bit as a harmless prank, but enough to cause serious visible damage. Picture the horror of discovering that your hair is literally dissolving in your hands. Imagine Jake standing in that shower, watching chunks of his hair washing down the drain, realizing that his carefully planned prom night was about to become a nightmare of humiliation. The panic, the disbelief, the growing rage as he understood exactly what had happened and who was responsible. By the time he got out of that shower, Jake looked like he'd been attacked by a demented barber. Patches of his scalp were completely bald, while other areas had uneven tufts that looked like a lawnmower had malfunctioned. There was no styling product in the world that could fix this catastrophe, no hat that could hide the damage, no excuse that could explain why the star student looked like he'd been through a blender. Jake faced an impossible choice: skip prom entirely and disappoint his date, his friends, and himself, or show up looking like a freak show and become the laughingstock of his entire senior class. After what must have been an agonizing internal debate, he made the only decision that preserved any shred of his dignity. He shaved off every remaining hair on his head. So there was Jake on prom night, completely bald, trying to salvage what should have been one of the most important nights of his teenage life. Can you imagine the strength it took to walk into that venue, knowing that everyone would be staring, whispering, and probably laughing? The sheer force of will required to smile, dance, and pretend that everything was fine, while inside you're plotting your sister's complete and utter destruction? I moved away from that small town just a few months after the prom incident, but I maintained contact with Jake through emails and text messages. Over the years, I watched him grow from that humiliated teenager into a successful adult. He graduated from college with honors, landed a great job in his chosen field, and eventually settled down near his parents, close enough to maintain family relationships but far enough to have his own life. Throughout those 9 years of correspondence, Jake never once mentioned getting revenge on Emma. He'd talk about work, relationships, his future plans, but never about settling the score with his sister. I honestly thought he'd moved past the whole thing, that maybe he'd decided to be the bigger person and let sleeping dogs lie. I couldn't have been more wrong. 9 years after that prom night disaster, my family and I received something unexpected in the mail: a wedding invitation. Emma was getting married, and apparently she'd invited everyone from the old neighborhood to celebrate her big day. The invitation was elaborate and elegant, the kind of thing that suggested this wasn't going to be a small, intimate affair, but rather a full-scale production. My wife and I thought it would be perfect timing for a trip back home. We could attend the wedding, visit family, and give ourselves a rare adult night out while my brother took care of our kids at the family lake cabin. It seemed like the ideal weekend getaway, a chance to reconnect with old friends and see how everyone's lives had turned out. The wedding was clearly going to be a major event. Emma's parents, the groom's parents, and the groom himself had all contributed to what was obviously going to be an expensive, elaborate celebration. We're talking about the kind of wedding that gets featured in magazines, professional photographers, designer flowers, a venue that costs more than most people's cars. Emma had grown into a beautiful woman, and from everything I'd heard through the small-town gossip network, she was genuinely happy with her fiancé. This was supposed to be a perfect day, the culmination of months of planning and thousands of dollars in expenses. Then, on the morning of the wedding, our phones buzzed with a text message that changed everything. The message was from Jake's father, and it was brief but shocking. Wedding has been cancelled, but the reception will go on as planned. It's just going to be a party now. Hope you can still make it. We stared at our phones in confusion. Wedding cancelled? What could possibly have happened at the last minute to derail months of planning and thousands of dollars in expenses? Car accident? Family emergency? Cold feet? Despite our confusion, we decided to attend the party anyway. We'd already made the trip. Our kids were settled at the lake cabin, and frankly, we were too curious to stay away. Sometimes the best stories come from the most unexpected situations. When we arrived at the venue, the scene was surreal. All the wedding decorations were still in place. Flowers, candles, elegant table settings, everything perfectly arranged for a celebration that was no longer happening. Guests milled around in their wedding attire, looking confused but oddly festive, like they'd stumbled into some alternate reality where wedding receptions happen without weddings. And there, in the middle of it all, was Jake, calm, composed, and wearing what I can only describe as the most satisfied smile I've ever seen on a human face. It didn't take long for the story to spread through the crowd like wildfire. Jake had struck back, and he'd done it with surgical precision that would make a Swiss watchmaker weep with envy. The night before Emma's wedding, the night before her perfect, elaborate, magazine-worthy wedding, Jake had paid a visit to his childhood home, while Emma was probably lying in bed, dreaming about her upcoming perfect day. Jake was in her bathroom, carefully doctoring her shampoo with the exact same hair removal cream she'd used on him 9 years earlier. The symmetry was absolutely breathtaking. The same product, the same method, the same devastating results, but delivered at the moment of maximum impact. Emma had ruined Jake's prom night, so Jake had ruined Emma's wedding day. The scales of justice had finally been balanced. When Emma woke up on her wedding morning and went through her normal routine, she experienced exactly what Jake had experienced nearly a decade earlier. The horror of watching her hair dissolve in her hands, the growing panic as she realized the extent of the damage, the crushing understanding that her perfect day had just become a nightmare. But unlike Jake, who had found the courage to show up to prom bald and hold his head high, Emma couldn't bring herself to face the hundreds of wedding guests. She refused to leave her room, refused to let anyone see her, and ultimately made the devastating decision to cancel the entire wedding rather than appear in public with damaged hair. The reaction from their parents was fascinating and telling. They were upset. Of course they were upset. Thousands of dollars down the drain, hundreds of disappointed guests, family drama that would be talked about for decades. But when pressed about it, they admitted something remarkable. They understood Jake's motivation completely. What Emma did to Jake on prom night was equally wrong, his father told the crowd. We were upset then, and we're upset now, but we can't say we're surprised. Jake waited for the right moment, and this was it. There's something almost Shakespearean about waiting 9 years for the perfect moment of revenge. Most people strike back in anger, in the heat of the moment, when emotions are running high. But Jake played the long game. He waited for the moment when his revenge would have maximum impact and perfect poetic justice. So what do you think? Was 9 years too long to hold a grudge? Or was this the most perfectly calculated revenge in sibling history? Would you have the patience to wait nearly a decade for the perfect moment to strike back? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'm genuinely curious about where you stand on this epic tale of long-term planning. If this story of ice-cold revenge got your blood pumping, Smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of patience, planning, and perfectly timed payback. Sometimes the best revenge truly is a dish served cold.